Hollywood, 1938. Two teenage girls sat in adjacent dressing rooms at MGM Studios, separated by a thin wall but divided by something far more substantial. On one side, 16-year-old Judy Garland prepared for another grueling day of filming. On the other side, Deanna Durbin, the same age, ran through vocal exercises. To the public and press, they were rivals competing for the same roles, the same spotlight, the same crown as America's sweetheart. But what really happened between these two young women was far more complex and ultimately more tragic than any simple rivalry. 50 years later, Deanna Durbin broke her decades-long silence about Judy Garland, revealing a truth that changed everything we thought we knew about their relationship. This isn't a story about jealousy or competition. This is about what Hollywood does when it pits talented young women against each other, and the unexpected friendship that survived despite everything. The rivalry began before either girl understood what was happening. In 1936, MGM had both teenagers under contract. Studio executives, always calculating, decided that two similar young singers represented inefficiency. They engineered a competition, deliberately creating tension and comparison where none needed to exist. They would keep one girl and drop the other. What seemed like a business decision was actually a psychological manipulation that would affect both young women for decades. The executives made their choice in a way designed to maximize damage. They kept Judy and released Deanna, but they made sure both girls knew the decision had been agonizingly close. They told Judy she had barely won, that she needed to work harder to prove they hadn't made a mistake. They told Deanna she had been good but not quite good enough, planting seeds of doubt and resentment. Both girls internalized these messages in ways that shaped their entire lives. What the studio executives didn't anticipate was that Judy and Deanna, instead of becoming enemies, recognized each other as fellow victims of the same system. They began meeting secretly, away from studio lots and prying eyes, to share their experiences and support each other. These weren't glamorous Hollywood friendship moments. These were survival meetings between two teenagers trying to navigate an industry designed to exploit them. Deanna, released from MGM, signed with Universal and became hugely successful. Her films were box office gold. Her voice was technically superior to Judy's in many ways. She achieved everything MGM had denied her the chance to do. But she watched from a distance as Judy remained trapped in the system that had destroyed their early friendship. She saw the pharmaceutical control, the weight obsession, the relentless schedule that ground Judy down. What Deanna revealed decades later was that she tried multiple times to help Judy escape. In the early 1940s, when both were at the height of their fame, Deanna reached out through intermediaries, suggesting they work together on independent projects outside studio control. Judy wanted to accept but couldn't. MGM's contracts were ironclad. She was property, not a free agent. The system that had chosen her over Deanna had also imprisoned her in ways Deanna had escaped. The public rivalry, carefully maintained by studio publicity machines, served multiple purposes. It generated press coverage and public interest. It kept both young women insecure and competitive, easier to control and manipulate. It prevented them from forming alliances that might threaten studio power. The manufactured feud was a control mechanism disguised as entertainment news, but privately, the two women maintained contact through the 1940s. Not constantly, not publicly, but consistently enough that each knew the other was there. Deanna would send notes of encouragement when Judy faced particularly difficult periods. Judy would congratulate Deanna on her successes. These small gestures of solidarity represented resistance against the system that wanted them to hate each other. The relationship became more complex in the late 1940s, when their career trajectories diverged dramatically. Deanna, exhausted by Hollywood's demands and having achieved financial security, made a radical choice. She retired from acting completely, moved to France, and lived a private life away from the entertainment industry. She was in her late 20s, at the peak of her earning potential, and she walked away. Judy, meanwhile, remained trapped in cycles of work and crisis, unable to escape even when she desperately wanted to. Deanna's retirement created guilt and confusion. She had escaped the system that was destroying Judy. She had found peace and privacy while Judy continued suffering in public. Part of her felt she had abandoned a friend in need. Another part recognized that staying in Hollywood to try to help would have meant sacrificing her own mental health and stability. It was an impossible situation with no good answers. What Deanna witnessed from her distance in France was Judy's slow destruction through the 1950s and 1960s. She read about the career collapses, the health crises, the financial disasters. She saw a woman who had been chosen over her by MGM being consumed by that same choice. The studio that had decided Judy was more valuable than Deanna had extracted every bit of that value and discarded what remained. In her later revelations, Deanna described feeling survivor's guilt about Judy's trajectory. She had been the one rejected by MGM, yet that rejection had inadvertently saved her life. She had been judged insufficient by the same executives who destroyed Judy through their demands. Being deemed not good enough had been the greatest gift they could have given her, though she didn't recognize it at the time. The two women had minimal contact in Judy's final years. Deanna had built a protective wall around her private life, refusing almost all connection to Hollywood. Judy was drowning in the consequences of decades of exploitation. When Deanna heard about Judy's death in 1969, she was devastated but not surprised. She had watched this tragedy unfold in slow motion for 30 years, powerless to prevent it. What Deanna revealed in her rare interviews decades later wasn't a story of professional rivalry. It was a story about institutional cruelty that pitted talented young women against each other for profit. She described MGM's manufactured competition as a form of abuse that damaged both of them, even though they responded to it differently. She acknowledged that her escape from the studio system, while saving her, also meant abandoning Judy to face it alone. Deanna also spoke about the broader pattern she observed in Hollywood. The industry consistently created false competitions between women, preventing solidarity and collective resistance. By making young actresses believe they were competing for limited opportunities, studios prevented them from recognizing their common interests and organizing for better treatment. The rivalry between her and Judy was just one example of a systematic strategy. Perhaps most powerfully, Deanna described the burden of being the one who survived. She had lived a long, relatively peaceful life in France, while Judy died at 47 after decades of suffering. That survival came with psychological costs, including guilt about choices she had made and wondering whether she could have done more to help. She acknowledged these feelings while also recognizing that sacrificing herself wouldn't have saved Judy from a system far larger than any individual friendship. What makes Deanna's testimony particularly valuable is her insider perspective combined with enough distance to see patterns clearly. She had experienced MGM's manipulation directly, understood how the studio system operated, but had also escaped it early enough to maintain perspective that those who stayed often lost. Her account provides crucial evidence about how Hollywood deliberately damaged relationships between women to maintain control. The supposed rivalry between Judy Garland and Deanna Durbin was really a story about two teenagers trying to survive an exploitative system that wanted them to see each other as enemies rather than allies. They resisted that narrative as much as they could, maintaining connection despite pressure to compete. That their friendship couldn't overcome the structural forces arrayed against them represents institutional failure, not personal failure. Today, when we discuss Hollywood's treatment of women, the Garland-Durbin dynamic offers important lessons. Systems that pit women against each other serve those in power by preventing solidarity and collective action, creating false scarcity. Suggesting there's only room for one success story ensures that talented people waste energy on competition rather than organizing for better treatment. The rivalry between Judy and Deanna was manufactured to serve studio interests, not to reflect reality. Deanna Durbin lived until 2013, carrying memories of Judy and their complicated relationship for over 40 years after Judy's death. In her final years, she spoke more openly about Hollywood, about the choices she had made, about the friend she couldn't save. Her testimony stands as witness to a system that destroyed one talented young woman while narrowly missing another. That she survived to tell the story doesn't diminish the tragedy. It makes her one of the few who can testify to what really happened behind Hollywood's glamorous facade.